Hey, welcome back. We're doing another edition of Pages Promotions Virtual Book Festival Autumn 2020. We are a production of Indie Reads TV. Find our home on CNM TV in Troy, Michigan. All month long, we are introducing you to authors and their books, and we're having conversations, and we're playing games, and we're giving away prizes, and we're just having more fun than people should be allowed to have, but we're doing it anyway. Today, we are going to be talking to Mark M. Bello. He is not only an amazing attorney, but he's also a great legal thriller writer, and he's going to be talking to us and reading a little bit from his latest novel. So, Mark, hey, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So can you give us just a really brief history of who you are and how you started writing?
Well, to repeat myself from the abbreviated or aborted previous
Right.
I've practiced law for 44 years. Actually, I haven't practiced law for 44. I've been a lawyer for 44 years. I stopped practicing about 5 years ago. And early in my career, when I was in my 30s, I handled a case where a Catholic priest committed an act of clergy abuse against two boys in Farmington Hills. And as I indicated last week, that same priest is now the subject of part of the Dana Nessel, the Attorney General of Michigan's investigation and prosecution of predator priests. And the priest that I pursued civilly is now being pursued again criminally. He was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct back in the 70s and served 6 months. And now apparently other children, now adults, older adults, but it's 40 years later,
right,
have come forward and they're going to prosecute him all over again at age 78.
Wow.
Anyway, that was the case of my life. It consumed me for 4 years. I traveled to 7 states. I took depositions. I hunted down witnesses. I spent an awful lot of money, and we got for the time, we got a pretty good result for our client. I told myself that I would one day write a book about the issue, and some 35 years later, Betrayal of Faith was born, my first novel.
Right.
That's basically what inspired me to be a writer. Following that came the 2016 election, which inspired my second novel, Betrayal of Justice. And then I basically, I don't think I would be surprising you that I caught the writer's bug, as they call it.
Yeah, you have been similarly afflicted.
I started writing novels about other topical issues in the news, what I call realistic fiction.
Right. So just give us real quick, give us the title and the theme of each book, and then we'll get into the reading.
Betrayal of Faith is the first book, which is I just described for you. Justice is about a bigoted president who decides to deport all Muslims and other bad things.
Okay.
And essentially, without being very political, when the 2016 election was happening, I was somewhat concerned that, oops, my Kindle just went off. I was somewhat concerned that a bigot would be elected president. And as a result, I wrote the book essentially as a challenge. I wanted to send a message that that is not the kind of person I would like to be my president.
And the rest, as we say, is history.
Well, but you know, again, I don't want to get political, but a lot of
Right.
people have accused me of doing a hit job on President Trump. And my response to that is, I wrote the book. He became president afterward.
Right.
If you see a connection between my president and him, that's his fault, not mine.
Exactly. Yep, the book came first.
The book came first.
What's the next book in the series?
Betrayal in Blue is a follow-up to Betrayal of Justice. It's not necessarily a sequel. I'm trying to get my Kindle to work. There it goes. It's more, I would call it a follow-up, and there's a white supremacy angle to Betrayal of Justice, and this basically follows up the on the white supremacy issue. A policeman is accused of killing the white supremacist that he was tracking down, and the local police force. And for those of you, all of you are from Michigan, yes?
Yes, yes, we are.
The cop is a Dearborn cop. He travels to Manistee. For those of you who don't know Manistee, it's a West Coast Lake, Michigan community.
Okay.
And the small town cop is jealous of the big town cop, which is why it is the Betrayal in Blue. And he decides to prosecute the cop, even though he probably thinks he's innocent.
Okay. Don't tell us any more, because that's a really good cliffhanger for us to get interested in.
All right.
And then
Braylon Black is a book about loosely based on the Rolando Castillo shooting, which the girlfriend videoed in the car.
okay.
In my book, it's a family in the car, but it's about a cop shooting an innocent black man because he happens to have a gun in his glove compartment, a licensed gun.
Okay.
Betrayal High is about a school shooting. It's the book I tried to read last week. Probably not the best choice for a quote family-friendly audience.
Right.
So I won't be reading that today. I'll be reading the first chapter of Betrayal of Faith, by the way.
Perfect.
And then I wrote a sixth book, again, based on fact. It's based on the Kavanaugh Supreme Court proceedings, his candidacy and nomination. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away, and I'm about to release this book. So it's kind of timely. I've had a habit of that. The Betrayal of Black was released, and George Floyd happened.
Okay.
Betrayal
somewhere
of Blue was released, and Donald Trump started talking about white supremacy. So
I'm thinking that, yeah, I'm thinking that your muse is probably watching a lot of like CNN and MSNBC, and your muse is kind of like preempting your writing. That's what it sounds like.
I can't say. I do watch a lot of news. I do watch a lot of news these days. Quite honestly, I watch a lot of news to get ideas for new books. So.
Well, yeah, because truth is weirder than fiction. We all know that.
Yep.
So why don't you?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Perfect. Why don't you give us a little reading, about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open up the room for questions.
I can do that. This is
Okay.
Betrayal of Faith, Betrayal of Faith, Chapter 1. It was a beautiful spring day in Michigan. Flowers were beginning to bloom, and buds were blossoming on once barren tree branches. The snow disappeared for another season, and the temperature climbed above 60 degrees for the first time. Jennifer Tracy drove her 2013 Chevy Tahoe south on Farmington Road toward the church. She thought, what a great weekend for a camping trip. The boys needed this. I hope they like Father Jerry. We pulled into the parking lot of Our Lady of the Lakes Church and School, parked, exited the old truck, and headed for the rectory. She spotted the group almost immediately. Actually, she spotted a bunch of backpacks, camping equipment, pop bottles, shoes, socks, and other debris thrown across the lawn of the rather impressive two-story brick home. She was the first parent to arrive, not surprising considering she was a half hour early. Jennifer was excited to see the boys. This was their first overnight since Father Bill's transfer. Father Bill was the only man the boys warmed up to since their dad, Jim, passed away. My God, has it been 3 years already? We remembered the day of the accident like it was yesterday. A phone call from the plant with the shocking news and the rush to Botsford Hospital. The family gathered for an all-night prayer-dominated vigil until finally the doctor came out of surgery shaking his head. I'm terribly sorry. We did all we could. We remember trying to explain to the boys, 9 and 11, that their father was called to heaven and that God worked in mysterious ways. Jake, her sensitive 9-year-old, wanted to know if he could visit. Penny, her 11-year-old, sat stunned, staring at the sky with piercing green eyes, wondering why the Lord chose to take his father when he needed him most. Life seemed so unfair. Jim's loss was incredibly hard on the boys. They were bitter and sullen until they met Father Bill. Bill transferred from a parish in Pennsylvania when Jim's accident occurred. After Jim's death, Bill made the boys his special project, and in short time became something akin to a substitute father. He took the boys to Detroit Tiger baseball games, played ball with them, took them camping, and even let them sleep overnight at the rectory. They became altar boys and were beginning to adjust to life without their father reasonably well. Then one day last month, Father Bill came by the house and announced he'd been transferred to a parish in Virginia. He spent 3 years in Michigan, and it was time to move on. The boys may as well have heard that Father Bill had died, like their dad. Father Bill's farewell celebration was more like a wake. He took the boys aside and tried to explain that he was required to do God's work wherever the church sent him. He said he'd try to visit as often as possible, but the boys were unconvinced. The looks on their faces when Father Bill drove off were almost as sad as the day they heard their news of their father's death. That was why this outing with Father Jerry was so important. Jerry was Bill's replacement and had been at the lake, the parish nickname, less than a month. This camping trip was Jerry's first chance to spend extended time with the boys away from parish responsibilities. Jennifer knew it would take some time, but she hoped the boys would at least like him. He climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door of their large brick colonial. It was a typical suburban Michigan home, 2 stories with red, white, and black reclaimed brick and white aluminum siding. The grounds were massive since the house stood on church property. The lot was heavily treed and the grass had been freshly trimmed. Jennifer could smell the fresh cut grass, one of the beautiful smells of spring in Michigan. Father Jerry came to the door and invited her in. Boys were running all over the house, chasing each other. The noise was deafening. Jennifer scanned the crowd but could not locate Jake or Kenny. Nice to see you again, Jenny, Jerry chirped. Nice to see you too, Father. How was the outing? The boys had a great time. They're still having a great time, as you can see. Jake and Kenny are in the backyard. I'll go fetch them for you. Oh, don't trouble yourself, Father. You have your hands full here. I'll get them. No trouble at all, Jenny. Wait here. I'll be right back with the boys. Jennifer would have preferred to get the boys, given the noise level in the house. Instead, she walked out onto the front porch to wait in the sunshine. In no time, as Jake would say, Father Jerry appeared with her 2 sons. The contrast between Jake and Kenny and the other boys was absolutely startling. The boys were sullen, gloomy. "Here they are, safe and sound," Father Jerry reported. "Boys, say hi to your mom." "Hi, Mom," Kenny managed, his voice barely audible. "Yeah, hi, Mom," Jake grunted. "What's the matter with you guys?" Jerry inquired. "Did I tire you out that much?" To Jennifer, he advised, "I ran these kids ragged. Hiking, calisthenics, canoeing, all-night stories, you name it, they're tired. Take them home and put them to bed. They'll be fine in the morning." Jennifer was shocked. The other boys were none the worse for wear. What was wrong with hers? "Thank you, Father," she managed. "I'll do just that." The Tracy family climbed into the wagon and Jennifer headed for home. The boys sat in the back seat together. Usually, they fought over who would sit in the front. Jennifer's concern level increased. "Did you guys have a good time?" No answer. "How was Father Jerry? He seemed quite nice. Is he as good a camp director as Father Bill?" No answer. Jennifer was almost in a panic. She adjusted her rearview mirror to look at her two silent sons. Kenny was glaring at Jake fiercely, with one finger to his lips, silently ordering him quiet. A single tear ran down Kenny's cheek. The family drove home in silence. Something was terribly wrong.
Well done. Well done. See, this is it's so gripping because we think, because we know how the story came into being, we think we know how it's going to end. And truly, we have no idea how it's going to end. So I just encourage everyone, well, yeah, you do, but I encourage everyone who has not yet read the book, that this is not just a retelling of a news event. This is a real personable connectivity to this story. So I would encourage everyone who gets an opportunity, start at chapter 2 and just keep going. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions, so everybody can turn on their microphones.
Yay!
Yay!
By the way, that's the original. The reason I didn't read it from the book was because this has been edited and changed. So, but that's the cover.
Yep. Your cover designer is just stunning. They do a great job.
Thank you.
I love how they're all tied together, but they're all individual covers as well. I think they do a great job with them. So well done there.
I appreciate it.
Anyone else have questions for Mark?
So obviously your legal background obviously gives you a lot of where you draw your research from. Where else do you draw your research from in your writing?
Ooh, everywhere. A lot in the library, even though most people don't use libraries anymore. I do. I read a lot of internet accounts of real stories. What I try to do, as I kind of indicated earlier, is if I find a topic that I find interesting, when most people ask questions like this, I say I find something that ticks me off. I use the P word rather than T word, and then I try to put a legal slant on it. So, for instance, this book obviously is based on a real case I handled. So that was, I'm not going to say it's an easy book to write because it's a hard topic in it. By the way, I want to share something funny with you guys. I'm a first-time author, and I sat down and I wrote this book about my personal experience. And I buy a book to help me become an author, and it's something like, advice for the first-time novelist or something like that. And the very first line, in the how-to book was pick a subject that people want to read about. Don't pick something grim like child abuse.
Well done.
That was the first line in this book. So tells you what, where my mind is. Anyway, the Betrayal in Black, which is about the shooting, I took the incident from news accounts and the internet reporting of the Castile shooting, but my legal background took over, and there was a criminal prosecution and a civil case, and a case against the cop, and a case against the city, and a case against the police department, and all of that, to answer your question, comes from my legal background. So it just depends on the topic and the I don't know whether I'm inspired to write a trial or whether I'm inspired to write something else. One of my cases involves book involves a mediation process rather than a trial process, which I thought using an alternative dispute resolution concept might be interesting to people. So it just depends on what the topic is.
Well, you definitely have a lot of fuel for your writing fires. I mean, not just personal fuel, but with everything that's going on in public affairs throughout our world, you certainly have tons of stuff that you can draw from. Any other questions?
My daughter called me a grumpy old man.
Yeah, there you go. Andrew, go ahead.
No, Deborah first. I saw her raise her hand. I will yield to the
Deborah.
young lady.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not.
Start, Andrew.
I mean, it's not really a question.
There she
It's
is.
just, yeah, I'm here. No, it's not really a question. It's just more like, wow. I mean, as a mother, this is my worst nightmare. And
Tell me about it.
yeah, and you just set it up perfectly. I mean, like your word choices, your phrasing, everything just set it up to where, I mean, yeah, this mom is all of a sudden.
I really like that chapter. That's why I read it.
Yeah. It was, you did a very good job, because as a mother, I mean, I'm already feeling this other mother's panic and pain at what might have happened, and, like the foreshadowing of what might have happened. And I'll definitely be buying your book. And my kids were asking, they're like, oh, well, who are you listening to today? And I gave them your name. And what does he write? Well, legal thrillers. And my husband went, ooh. So I'm probably passing your book along.
Tell more people. Tell more people.
Oh, yes.
That's what we're doing here today. Andrew, go ahead.
What?
Yeah, when I sat next to you.
Before you ask your question, the interesting thing about this that I didn't think about is that what I just read was the very first chapter I've ever written in my life in a book. So
It was fantastic.
I didn't even think about that. It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead, Andrew.
you basically
Yes,
were opening a new chapter in your life. Dun, dun, dun. Okay.
So how profound.
When we sat next to each other, I thought, a lawyer writing books, that's sometimes a recipe for disaster, because most of the lawyers I know are very dry, very boring, and really are slanted.
Very short.
Yeah, very much. But I enjoyed the books that I have. I have 3 of them. So I enjoyed the books that I have of yours, and I'll be picking up the others. But good job. I mean, you keep things interesting. You keep the story moving along. I don't always agree with your conclusions, but I always enjoy the book. But I think that's true with all of us. It was good entertainment and lots of fun, which is exactly what we all need.
Are you speaking about the
Absolutely.
legal conclusions or the political conclusions?
Either or sometimes. I mean, legal and political. It's called gray area. Who's the best?
Yeah.
The best orator and who convinces the groups that they're correct. But sometimes
that actually is one of my pet peeves, and one of the things that caused me to write is we have three branches of government, and they're not supposed to infringe on the other. And I don't like when the judicial branch is infringed upon by the executive or the legislative branch. And that happens an awful lot, and it infringes on people's rights to pursue litigation. And there's a Seventh Amendment. There's a Seventh Amendment in the Constitution. Very few people know about the Seventh Amendment. It says that you have the right to pursue a civil case. That's a person suing somebody who harmed them for any amount over $25.
Correct.
That's what the Seventh Amendment says.
But we also have the right to a speedy trial, which that's gone out the tubes too.
Yeah, so much for that.
That's a criminal. That's a criminal issue.
Kate says that she has another vein of question for you. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay.
So I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock so that I don't make run over.
Appreciate that.
For other people that are either writing or interested in writing about either true crime or based on real events, what would be the number one piece of advice that you would give them? I've never written that, so would it be legal? Would it be research? Would it be walking the line so you don't get sued? What would be your number one piece of advice for people interested in writing that genre?
Writing this genre?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, if you write fiction, you're not going to get sued. I immediately tell people that what I've written is make believe by calling it fiction. Just because
you have that little disclaimer in the front of your novel, right?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
but I mean, just because something is based on fact doesn't make it fact.
That's true.
I mean, I suppose. Well, first of all, you guys should know, and one of the criticisms, I kind of said that the legislative and executive kind of pick on the judicial a lot and try to restrict people's access to the courts. One of the reasons they do that is because for a filing fee, anybody could sue anybody. So you have what they call, and there aren't that many of them because they're not worth filing, but they have what people on the right call the frivolous lawsuit. And you can file any frivolous lawsuit you want. It might get dismissed.
But we try really, really hard not to. Yeah, so we try hard not to do those by reminding
Correct.
people that what we're doing is fiction. So,
Correct.
so the piece that Kate was asking about was if another author came to you and said, gee, I want to write legal thrillers. What's the best way for me to start? What would your best advice to them be on how to get started?
Well, that's hard. That's hard for me because, unlike, let's say, any of you guys who are creative, I'm very self-flagellating. I don't consider myself that creative. I find topics of interest that I think would make good legal commentary, and I write about them. The only book I wrote that isn't based on actual events is Betrayal in Blue, the story about the cop pursuing the other cop.
Mm-hmm.
I have difficulty unless I have a frame of reference, like a real situation, to inspire me to write.
I honestly don't think that you give yourself enough credit. If anybody else in here has read Mark's books, but fall in, but I think you actually extrapolate out a significant amount that isn't actually factually based and create a story that's good. Everything from character development to the people that are how they're interacting.
No, I'm not
Yeah,
saying I'm
absolutely.
absolutely uncreative. George R.R. Martin. How do you do
Yeah,
that?
but he writes a whole other thing. I mean,
But my
that's like saying
God, how do you do that?
Well, but that's like saying, how does Stephen King do it? I mean, it's like, it's one of those mysteries we will never understand, so we're not even going to try to figure it out.
To be
Yeah, we are.
Dean Koontz or Stephen King, you got to be crazy. I mean, that's a
Aren't we all a little?
Yeah, we all have a little bit of insanity there.
Yeah.
Read my short stories.
Yeah, no kidding. Mark, thank you so much. I know we could go on for another 2 hours and enjoy this conversation. I'm so glad that you were able to come back and read for us. Everyone, Mark will be back again later in the month, and we'll have a more extensive Q&A opportunity. So you can write down some questions and come on back and you'll get to ask them directly. Again, thanks everybody for coming. We're doing this all month long. We're having a blast. Thank you very, very much, Mark, for sharing some of your vacation time with us. We are very grateful. This is, again, Pages Promotions. This is the Pages Promotions Virtual Book Festival, Autumn 2020, a production of Indie Reads TV, and we find our home on CNM TV in Troy, Michigan. Again, thank you, Mark. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot. Bye.